What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Deaton, and welcome back to another episode of Southern Wedding Professionals. And today, I have the wonderful, the fabulous Megan Mark with Events by EVA. So, Megan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm alive in a COVID world that we live in. I am surviving and somehow convincing myself mentally that I'm thriving.
Yeah. I think considering everything that's been going on, I think we're doing pretty okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
it seems like everybody's still kind of working. Seems like everybody's still kind of getting along and just handling the situation as best they can in their own circumstances. But before we get too deep with all that, tell us a little bit about you and your business.
yes, so I started Events by Eva in the beginning of 2020, so pretty much going into all the COVID craziness.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so a little I guess you could say it's kind of a weird time to start a wedding planning business, but I guess the unknowns kind of give room to grow and I think really learn and jump into it right off the bat. Probably gaining experience that I wouldn't have had I started it, 5 years ago or so. Um, so yeah, it's we're a new company to the Chattanooga area, and I started my work experience previously was working in a lot of concert planning, festival planning, charity event planning, and also marketing as well. And I did some artist management. So I worked primarily in the music industry. And a lot of the skills are really applicable to the running the show part of wedding planning, negotiating when you can negotiate with vendors. Some are more negotiable than others, but a lot of it was really transferable. And I kind of really enjoy the part where you get to focus on design, but also, you know, be the person who's running the show. So, yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. Like your background is so diverse. I really honestly can't wait to unpack that. Before we do that though, tell me a little bit about the specific like packages and type of planning that your company does.
Yes, so we have three standard packages that we offer, but we also do customized packages as well. So we have, I kind of named them somewhat, I guess you could say, typical wedding phrases. So something blue, something borrowed, something new. And so one of those is our day of coordination package, which is really almost 2 months where I start gathering all the details before. That really starts at 8 weeks before your wedding date, where I send out clients a questionnaire to give me all this information so that I can start on their timeline and start gathering information to start doing all the management and logistical aspects that needs to be done with each vendor. So that's, I would say, our lowest tiered package of the standard three packages. Then we do a partial planning package where I'm the person who's kind of handling all the negotiations and availabilities with up to 4 vendors. And that is kind of just added on from the day of coordination package. It kind of ends up being more than 4 vendors sometimes. It kind of depends. That package is usually chosen dependent on kind of where a client is in their wedding planning process.
Sure.
Um, and then full planning, it kind of varies, but it's really everything and anything that you kind of want me to be as involved in or not involved in. Sometimes people like to book full planning and they might want to handle one vendor on their own. But usually it's if you have a venue and everything else needs to be booked, or if you need um, more help with your design, both partial planning and full planning include budget management and help with design as well of the
Right.
overall event. Day of coordination does not include budget planning or design of the full event.
Right.
That's more of managing what you've put together. And on occasion, there will be couples who come to me without having picked their wedding venue, but more often than not, most people have booked their wedding venue
Right.
before signing on to full planning.
Right.
So, yeah, that seems to be the thing that everyone books first is the venue, and then they start looking into all of their vendors.
Right. That's interesting to me. Like everybody that offers day of coordination it always ends up coming out at some point that it's never just day of. It's always
Mhm.
like the day of is like kind of a misleading term, I guess. Right? It's always like
Yes.
month or 2 months in advance, or however far it goes.
Yeah.
Per per person's providing the service. So
Yeah. And
um,
it also, day of coordination too, there's so much work. The more DIY, the more work it ends up really being,
yes,
the day of too. So I like to bring someone else with me to help with all the setup, running the show tear down, because it's usually very quick. And so, that covers that as well. On occasion, someone will still want me to do it, and they don't want to pay that full day of coordination package. And sometimes I will create a custom package
right,
that, is just me, is more for the sake of running the show, might help with setup tear down. But if you have a lot of bridal party and family members or extra people who are willing and able to help that morning of and don't need to get ready, then there's more wiggle room, because then I don't need to hire somebody else to come do that date. So,
right.
um, yeah.
That's great. I mean, thinking about some of the things that make you unique is what you mentioned in the very beginning. And so many people that I know get into this business, and it's either they go to a wedding and then they're like, I want to do that. That looks like a fun job to do. And they find out all the hardships to go with that. But as far as like that romantic idea and actual reality. But like your background is really deep in planning and coordination and being able to handle a variety of circumstances and vendors and such. Tell us kind of like how you got to here, but also kind of highlight along the way, those things that you learned along the way in each one of those sort of jobs that you had. Because I mean,
Mhm.
they're also unique, but they're also they're very much linked together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I will say to a certain extent, I was someone who um, I planned my own wedding. I did have someone who did like month of coordination. And I will actually even say that I spoke with her before I even picked a venue, because I thought it would be smart to pick somebody's brain who's worked at the two venues I was between, um, and get their
Fabulous.
thoughts. Um,
Fabulous.
Yeah. So, I mean, even let's say you're someone who's not looking for a full wedding planner or partial wedding planner, you still could get some help going into it by even just talking to a wedding planner and doing a consultation before you even book the venue. Because a lot of times, this is kind of slightly off topic of the question, but a lot of times what I'll see is someone will have booked a venue, added on certain add ons, and they only have X budget and they don't really know what is realistic in terms of what things cost. And I think that that's something that could help someone better choose a venue or package at a venue that makes the most sense for their budget.
Right.
And I think have realistic expectations of what they're getting themselves into. So that's one thing. Even if you're not booking partial or full planning, I do recommend at least trying to have a conversation and pick someone's brain about all the moving pieces before you commit to anything. But back to your question, so I was partially someone who I did do that. I spoke to a planner, and I did hire her for a month of and day of coordination. Um, but I really wanted to be involved in the planning process of my own wedding, and every little kind of detail, especially the design. I kind of had I would say, far from traditional design that I wanted. Um, so I wanted to kind of have the opportunity to be creative with it, and I also had a long lead time to plan as well. Um, but I really just loved the process, and a lot of it was so similar to the jobs that I had done before. Um, there's one other local planner who had mentioned something to me once, that she said, um, we can only be as organized as our brides are as well when it comes to especially day of coordination. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as I'm about to talk about some of the next things, especially with day of coordination. The more communicative and more overly communicative you are, the better your wedding is going to go. When it's voiced that there isn't a flower list provided from the florist or provided from the bride or groom, we don't know what to do with those things, and usually those things are placed by the florist. If there's not a conversation of, these are all the things that we want to set up, we have this guest book, all those sorts of things, the layout that we create is not going to be right. Or there might not be enough tables, things like that. So
Right.
to the question of how the previous jobs that I had would or were applicable to this profession, a lot of what it taught was to think of every single thing that could go wrong and how could you best prevent it, because it is going to go wrong. Um, uh, and by that, like, I mean, like, you're booking back in the music industry, booking a tour, um, and you've got X crew flying in and they're landing at 1 in the morning, which means they're not getting to the hotel at 3 in the morning, which technically most hotels will give that hotel room away even after you've called them 10 times and after you've paid in full in advance, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
It will happen even if you've done that. So just kind of prepping for the things that do go wrong. And I think also being able to change things on the spot. Something I always tell couples or brides, whoever it is that I'm speaking with, the timeline is a guideline. It always changes. Rarely does it not change. And a lot, I think, of the skill of the running the show part of a wedding is, like, for me at this point, I know what the timeline is, and I might check certain things, check who are the names, who are doing toasts, things like that. But at this point, I'm watching the room, I'm doing it on a whim. Is the sunset good right now? Photographer, do you want to go do golden hour photos? Okay, what can we change to make this work? Okay, now we just spent too long doing photos. Are we moving up cake cutting? All these kinds of things to kind of watch the feel of the room and what is the timing of all those sorts of things, just kind of doing it on the fly in the spot. Sometimes it goes pretty according to plan, but more often than not, it makes sense, not as a negative thing, not because we're running behind. So a lot of the time we are, but
Sure.
to go with what's happening. Are people still in line for food? If that's the case, we don't want to start something right then and there. So really, I think being a problem solver and maneuvering things on the spot.
That is a huge skill, and it's just like me. Obviously, I'm a guitar player. You can see by the guitar
Mhm.
behind me. But like, being able to sing and play and look at a room and being able to read the room and know when it's the right time to play what song, fast,
Mhm.
slow, heartfelt, engaging, energetic, etc. Like knowing when to pull those levers, really
Mhm.
makes the night move, and just
Yep.
like you in your situation, it's the same. Knowing when to flex and knowing when to stay on schedule and having that sort of vision as to what's coming in the next hour or two or three so that you can get everything in and get everything in the best way possible. Because as you know,
Yeah.
things are always evolving and changing. And when you put 200, 300, 400 people in a room and you've got to somehow move them from point A to point B, it just always seems to take longer than it should.
Yeah. Yeah. Always.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, let's go back. Let's do the genealogy thing. Let's go back to the very beginning. What was your first job in this music, booking, entertainment
Um,
world? Like, where would you say it first started for you?
So working in artist management.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Los Angeles. Um, I now live in Tennessee, and I moved here almost, I think it was almost a year and a half ago from New York. Um, so I went to University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and then I decided to stay there because I really wanted to work in the pop rock world. My dream was always to live in New York, but if you want to work in pop music, you're better off in Los Angeles. So I stayed there for quite some time. And I started as an assistant at a music management firm that I had actually interned at in New York, and then started working um, as a part-time paid intern while I was in my senior year of college, and kind of just didn't leave until I got hired. Um, but it was honestly, I will still say to date, and I definitely owe a lot of this to the boss that I had. It was, of any job experience I've had, the best learning experience. And I think the job where in every single position that I had since then, what I learned from her was applicable, is still applicable now.
Wow.
Um, and it was a great experience because it was like, okay, you do well, you get to take on more responsibility, you get to take on more responsibility. And so, I got to travel because of it, which was fun. And that's where I think the traveling is where I learned a lot more of the stage management part of it, and just managing an event from behind the scenes, because sometimes I'd have to be the tour manager. So, so
I've
stuff
been
like
there
that.
before.
Where, yeah. So, yeah, it was interesting. I mean, like there was one charity event that I completely planned, like start to finish, pretty much for the most part on my own. And um you know traveled for some one-offs and stuff like that, and handled a lot of the management and logistics for award shows and
Sure.
things like that. So large scale for a lot of them, but some were also much smaller as well. So yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I mean, so you're doing the artist management thing.
Mhm.
You're intern and you're moving up the ranks, and you're traveling with these bands, and you're going all over the place doing all the things. And so, at what point? Where's the next pivot point from that? Where do you move? Where did you move from that particular moment in
From
time?
there. So from there, I had taken another artist management job, but from there, I had also, after that, I moved to New York on a whim. I always wanted to live there. I was like, I'm just going to do it, figure it out. I still worked in music. I got a job doing digital marketing. So part of artist management always did involve marketing. You had to be involved in the overall marketing plans, and as much as you were in the budgeting and touring aspect, you really had to be there for the promoting and marketing and entire album campaigns as well. So it was applicable to that position, just from a different angle. So I did that in New York, and then so from there, I started managing an artist independently as well. She's a songwriter and also has her own artist career. So I kind of did that, but being able to do that on my own also is what gave me the opportunity to start this wedding business. While not having a full-time job and all those sorts of things that make it kind of hard to schedule and like really put your all into it. So
Right.
um, yeah, so I actually stopped doing that beginning of 2020, February 2020. So, um, yeah, it kind of, there was definitely overlap between the two. So,
Right. So when you so at what point did you decide to relocate to Cleveland? Is it Cleveland, Tennessee? Is that where you?
yeah, I'm in Cleveland. Yeah. So
What
I'm
part?
just a little north of Chattanooga, but
Right. Yeah, I'm
it's
very
not
familiar.
that far.
Yeah, yeah. I've driven past there 1,000 times that have never stopped off the exit. But like,
Yeah, there's a lot of wedding venues around this area over here. Even like the Chattanooga ones. You go a little bit west and you're in Hamilton County, so that's Chattanooga. Yeah.
right. And it's beautiful for people who don't know the country over there. Chattanooga is very underrated as far as its scenery and its
Hmm.
overall like beauty and charm. And the city has done. I've been going to Chattanooga for 17 years, and
Mm.
from 17 years ago till now, it's a completely different city, and it's a
Yeah.
very thriving, very fast growing, very energetic city. A lot of really great people of all kinds are flocking there. You're getting a lot of different fusions of things. I mean, the food
Yeah.
is off the chain if you're a big foodie. So,
So
but
someone
still,
told me,
Cleveland, Tennessee.
yeah,
Oh,
so
go ahead.
oh, well, I was gonna say someone told me, it might have been last year already. They told me, Chattanooga is kind of that place where like people who were in Austin made Austin cool, got sick of it because now it's becoming mainstream, and then are coming to areas like Chattanooga and building up the coffee shops and all that kind of hipster stuff. So, um, yeah, I don't know if you really.
I love coffee, so I was thoroughly impressed. I went to a coffee shop there. What was the name of it? It had all sorts of greenery. It was super cute and pink. And
Is it in a like building and it's split?
yes, what was it?
Sleepyhead.
Sleepyhead.
Yeah, that's my favorite coffee shop in downtown.
It is so cool. And I actually had a meeting there, and I was totally like I was just like, this is in Chattanooga now. Like this is like
Yeah.
probably this would probably be in the top two coffee shops in Atlanta if it was there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
um,
and it's not cheap either. And I've paid for some. I'm actually not a coffee person. I'm a matcha tea latte person, and I've paid
oh,
for some expensive ones here and outside of here. So
yeah,
yeah,
coffee is like the biggest markup of all time as far as like what you should be paying for it versus what you end up paying for it in a coffee shop. But I mean, it's social, it's experience, it's great. And I love Sleepyhead. I thought, shout out Sleepyhead, you are doing it right.
yeah,
Totally doing it right, and the espresso was totally on point. So again, you're doing this in New York. You're managing this artist, and you're also kind of doing this wedding planning thing, and you're starting to get your sea legs on that and get moving. Did what made you choose Chattanooga? Was there like family here or something like that?
um, so I met my husband in New York at work, and uh, he wanted to start grad school, and he actually grew up in Cleveland. And so we were actually between, well, does he go to this school in Atlanta? Does he
Mhm.
go to Lee University here in Cleveland? And so it ended up being Lee. The long-term plan was eventually to come to this area, but it just made sense at that point to, move then. So
I'm very familiar with Lee. As a guitarist that also works in the wedding industry with my business on the side of this, beyond this podcast, I should say.
hmm.
I play at a church on Sunday mornings. They hire me to come in and play guitar for them, and
Mm.
they are almost exclusively staffed with Lee graduates.
Oh wow. Is that in the Atlanta area or?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I literally interact with graduates of Lee all the time. Good people.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So you move down here and then you get the ball rolling in 2020. You probably launch your website, you get your marketing game on
Mhm.
point. You are looking at 2020 and it is looking fine. And then COVID.
Yeah, which I think, I mean, knock on wood, um, I think for me, a lot of what the learning experience this year has been price points. Doing weddings is a lot of work, a lot of physically exhausting labor.
Yes.
And I think that that's not something that's usually realized until the end of the night. So, you know, I think Chattanooga is a big bridal market, but um, the amount that people are willing to pay
Mm.
for wedding planners versus, another more major city. There's definitely a large difference, I think. Um, and so I think a lot for me has been figuring out like what is the right price point, that I'm comfortable with, that someone's also willing to pay. Um, so that's kind of been the interesting learning experience for me. It has moved quicker than I anticipated. I thought, I started it really was December that I started, and I thought, oh, there's not really going to be any inquiries till the summer, and that was not the case at all. Right now at the moment, I can't think of what is the exact number of weddings that have happened, but I want to say so far, even with COVID, I think there's been 13 to 14 weddings that have happened or that I've done so far this year.
So great. I mean, so many people I've talked to have not done that many, and some have done, equal that, but still, I feel like anything that's getting done in this time to keep the wheels on our industry moving is just a win.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really crazy. It's really crazy. And in ways it's, some months it's like, okay, there's like I can't keep up with the inquiries, it feels like, and then there's others where I'm like, when am I gonna hear some? So
It's been very
it's really, I
unexpected.
think, yeah, yeah. So I think it's like I think part of it's learning like, okay, this is the season for this is a season for weddings, this is a season for engagements and booking and all those sorts of things. And I really like to talk with at least the bride before booking. Um, I really like to be able to talk to them about like what are the costs you're actually looking at before, you know, they decide on doing full planning, but it makes sense for them to do day of coordination. Um, I want them to know that they can actually do the full picture and still pick something that makes the most sense for them. Um, but what I find interesting is it's not, sometimes you'll get inquiries and they're just shopping around for the lowest price they can find, versus like actually doing that free consultation that's offered or phone call and learning what is it that is pricing, this day of coordination package, this full wedding planning package at what it is, um, to kind of understand the value. So I think the hardest thing about it is being able to communicate the value behind what you're actually paying for.
As someone who owns an entertainment company that provides weddings and corporate events with entertainment, bands, etc., I completely understand what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
It's really important to like. I know, and in this world that we live in, that's so fast paced. Everybody just wants to get straight to the
Yeah. I,
point. There really is. You're going to be working with these people for
mhm.
6 months, 12 months, sometimes 18 months,
Yeah.
about the day that is probably the most important day of your life. Like,
Mhm.
let's just put everything in perspective for a moment and think about why it's important that you have a conversation with each and every person that you're considering,
Mhm.
and taking that time out to really make sure that you make the right decision. Or
Mhm.
in your case, finding that team member first, your wedding planner, and then going. I've always said this, like, why do we why is the culture that we need to go book the venue before you even consult a planner? Because if you have these wild dreams about what you want to achieve with your wedding or your event, and you go book a venue that doesn't line up with that venue or that vision, and then the wedding planner has to break it to you, it's like, yeah, for example, they only allow bands that are 6 pieces. They don't allow like a 12-piece band, and you want a 12-piece band, and now you can't have that.
Mhm. Yeah.
They don't have the space, or the circuitry or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
it's just funny to me, like how people are generally rushed into trying to get a venue because they're
Yeah.
scared to miss out on that when all they have to do is just take an extra week or two, to find the right planner first, you know?
Yeah. And I'll say too, like venues do book out really far in advance now. Like I mean, even for me, like I've gotten inquiries for 2022, you know? So yeah, things do book far out, but I think it shouldn't take that long to get on the phone with someone to just pick their brain really quickly. Um, when I say someone, I mean a
Right,
planner. They're not gonna, I
right,
mean, they shouldn't charge you for, a 15, 30-minute phone call where, you say, hey, I like these venues. This is my budget. Do you think this is feasible? What would the breakdown look like? I think that should be something that kind of sells, someone. But
sure.
yeah, and the thing that I've found interesting too is that people aren't willing to ask for a deal. Like if you really want to go with a certain person and if it's the right fit and like, maybe I really like your style and I really want to do it. Maybe I'll cut you some sort of customized package. Like I mentioned, I have those three standard packages, but I also do customized packages as well. And there's always not every vendor is negotiable. Some are, this is what it is, and this is what you get, take it or leave it. But especially, I think, being a newer business for me at this place in time, like maybe if I was at the point where, you know, I was booking 3 weddings a day and had to turn people away, I may not offer that. But at this point in time, it's like I personally, for my business, am trying to say certain tone and, style or something that if you want, X kind of wedding, you go to me. If you want X kind of wedding, you might go to another planner, something like that. Um, it's surprising to me. Just ask questions. You have nothing to lose.
Right. And people just, I feel like they just treat it as if they're, you know, buying something on
Picking a box.
Amazon in a way. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Mhm.
it should be a lot more, there should be a lot more conversation. And if you really connect with someone, you're exactly right. If you really connect with someone, and if you're a bride or a groom listening right now, it, and you're looking for a wedding planner or you're looking for a vendor or whatever, and you feel like that encapsulates the vision for what you have for that day, then, and they're too expensive for you, you know, straight up go to them and ask and just say, hey, listen, this is where I'm at. Is there any wiggle room or whatever? And
Mhm.
sometimes they'll say no. I mean, and
Yeah.
sometimes these people have hard costs that they have to, they have to deal with.
Hmm.
But sometimes there's wiggle room, and then that gives you the opportunity to really have the day that you're, you know,
That you envision or the team that you're hoping to have too. So
it's
yeah.
super important. But how did you? Now I got to ask this question because you said, yeah, I started this company, blah blah blah. Early 2020, boom, like 12, 16 weddings right out of the gate. What did you do to be found? How did people go about finding you? Like, did you run ads? Did you? I mean, did you just have like a really incredible network? Was it just something that just happened organically? And if so, please tell the world how you did it because they want to know.
Yeah, a few things. A few things. I think that so I got married at a venue called Howe Farms here in Chattanooga, and they now have 5 venues up and running. When I booked them, they had 2. When I
Wow.
got married, they had 2. They now have 5. And so, like I had actually booked that venue without seeing it. I still lived in New York when I booked that venue for my wedding. And I just, I think it was just, I was friendly with them. And I was like, hey, if you ever have any budget brides who need someone, I'd be happy to help them out, and not break their bank sort of thing. And
Right.
um, I think like I'm very, very thankful to them because they have sent me a lot of referrals. That really helped to kind of get things off and running. They sent me a lot of referrals. Some was like it was friends I knew they were getting married. It's like, hey, I'll plan your wedding for you,
Right.
let me use the photos, they still gave me something, but you know, hey, I'll, not gonna charge you. We got an arm and a leg here. Let me help you, sort of thing. So that kind of helped to get some examples going. And then also I did really also pitch to people. There are a ton of, wedding groups on Facebook and stuff, and it was, okay, someone's looking for a coordinator, someone's looking for a planner, I'm going to pitch myself. And a few of the weddings came from Facebook groups. So it, and that felt like a dead end. For a long time, that kind of felt like a dead end. But then a few of them clicked, and it was more bookings, more learning experience, getting to be at different venues. I also did a like Instagram contest with a photographer here in Chattanooga too, and so that got an additional wedding for the year. And I also spent some time working on my SEO. And around COVID, I kind of updated my website search. I also definitely, if you're starting any kind of business, whether it's wedding planning, a DJ business, a catering business, whatever it is, you definitely need to get up your Google business profile. Because my following on social media, I think I have like 477 followers right now. It's not large, but most of that, I think when I started the account, it was probably at 50, and that was in January. So it's not terrible for being the amount of time it's been, but I've gotten inquiries from Instagram, from people seeing working with other vendors probably, and even just using hashtags, working on my website SEO. So around COVID, I updated my website description and my SEO to put in like, okay, if you had to postpone your wedding or reschedule your wedding due to COVID, I will give you X% off. And so I had a few inquiries that came in from that as well. So I think it's really been a combination. Yeah. So honestly, it's been combination of How Farms. They really helped kickstart it all off. And I know so many vendors in Chattanooga. You'll hear people say like half of my weddings are at How Farms now, because they have so many amazing venues that are just very different than the typical barn that you might find in the area. So there's some variety there. But they helped networking. I've gotten a few referrals from other vendors that I just, reached out to or either got to know in some way, and have either gotten them bookings as well. And Instagram, Facebook groups, and really just, actually pitching myself, and Google, honestly. It's come, yeah.
It sounds like a lot of this is just like raw organic work. It sounds like you haven't really spent much in advertising as far as like ads. And I mean, maybe you had somebody do your SEO or you did your SEO yourself.
I did it on my own. Yeah. So, because I did marketing, I'm not clueless when it comes to some of that stuff. And I really could get someone to do more of it, but that's an eventually thing for me. Um, I know the value of it, but it's just an eventually thing for me. And that's just my personal decision right now. And I have not spent any money on ads at this point in time right now. I have paid for a booth at Pink Bride, which was supposed to be in August. That got canceled. Well, not canceled. It's postponed. What Pink Bride is. So Pink Bride, yeah, Pink Bride is it's a company that puts on a bridal trade show, like a expo show, where vendors go and they have their own different booths, and a lot of them give away certain deals or have certain partnerships, even with, I believe, some of the other vendors that are there too. If you go over to one booth and you book with them, you might get 20% off at another booth, something like that, where you can go and essentially talk to vendors face to face, learn about them, and book them right there on the spot. I know a lot of them also still give certain deals if you book 2 weeks out after the event, those sorts of things too. So it's basically a expo show where you can meet and learn about vendors, photographers, bakers, planners, venues, decor companies, and you create your booth. So, anyways, Pink Bride is based in Knoxville, but they do expo shows. I'm pretty sure it's like all throughout the southeast. I don't believe it's only in Tennessee. I should know that, but I know they 100% do Knoxville, Chattanooga, Nashville. But I do think there might be some in Alabama. I want to say I'm blanking at the moment. Um, so I purchased a booth, and because of COVID, it was supposed to be in August, and then it was postponed to October 17th, and now let me double check. I believe it is January 25th.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
believe
so
it's
those
January
expos
25th.
are a really great way of getting to know a lot of vendors really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a bride and a groom out there and you want to, potentially go window shopping like you would a dress or
Mm-hmm.
something on Madison Avenue, you could just do that at an expo. They have these things.
Yeah.
Pink Bride is not the only one. There's a lot of different expos that are out there. You can search for wedding expos on Google and find a ton. It's big business for the expo community, but it's also a great way to connect with new people that maybe you wouldn't necessarily find in a Google search or you necessarily wouldn't find from word of mouth. So
Yeah.
exploring your options as a couple or an event coordinator that's trying to put together something specific, sometimes those kinds of things are really great.
Yeah. And so now the next Chattanooga Pink Bride is on January 24th, 2021 at the Chattanooga Convention Center. I think the tickets are, if you buy them early, they're like $12 a person. I think it only goes up to around 15. Don't quote me on that. Um, but I mean, that whatever you spend on it, you're probably going to get your money's worth if you get some sort of deal. So,
That's the allure, I think. One deal pays for everything.
yeah.
That's cool. So wow. So now that we're here and we're in this like COVID world and we're like, I mean, you did such a, I mean, finding the amount of work that you did in a COVID time is pretty amazing right out of the gate. I mean, where do you see this going? Do you have like any long-term goals within this business as far as like the kind of things you want to do, like um, maybe things you want to be known for? I mean, because obviously
Mhm.
you're hot to trot here. You're right out of the gate and doing so well.
Yeah, so if it were to ever be at a point where I could be choosing, well, you always choose who you work with, right? You always have every business owner has the right to, say it's not the right fit or something along those lines. But if I was at the point where I had so many inquiries and I was having to choose between some, I would say I would want to be the wedding planning business that when people see um, the work or see the photos after, it's something that's a little bit different, not extremely traditional. Someone wants something that's just a little different, whether it's, a unique shape in your florals or a unique color scheme, that's who you're going to go to versus I guess, more traditional. I think with saying that, there is a time and place and a very classic way of doing traditional as well. And that's something that I wouldn't necessarily fully want to stray from, but I think you can still do something that's even a little bit different within traditional. Um, so just something kind of more like left of center, especially when it comes to the design,
And that's sort of
is
like
what.
that's sort of where you feel like you sit in the Chattanooga market, that you kind of sit in this like left of center design world as opposed to maybe everybody else in your area.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm sure other people could pull off. I think that I can be more daring I don't know. I think it's just the different like upbringings maybe.
Sure. Well,
Um,
I mean, Atlanta,
yeah,
that kind of thing. That's a, that's that in itself. Those experiences and being involved in those two, major cities versus maybe just being a planner that's just from Chattanooga, for example. I mean, you're going to have different experiences, feelings, thoughts, vibes altogether,
hmm,
and that's going to influence probably your taste and also
yeah.
your overall vision for things. So that's a cool angle.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything that, I don't think there's negative with it being more traditional, or I don't think there's not a right or wrong way that you can go. It's just really preference. Like, are you someone who wants to do something that's a little bit out of the box? I think there's still ways that you can do things that are out of the box and still look back on them in 20, 30 years from now and still appreciate them versus them just be trends and doing things the way that you just see and you think it's trendy. So yeah, I think from a design element, that's kind of what my goal would be to do the weddings that are just a little bit different in some way or shape, even if it's not too different from traditional or doesn't stray that far, but just doing something different. In terms of the business structure right now, um, it's primarily me doing all of the planning. If you book, I'm the person you're talking to throughout the whole process, but I do have a few girls who have been helping day of, set up, running the show, tear down that, I've hired on for event days.
Sure.
In an ideal world, I would love to be able to have at least one other planner where it's more of a co-planning thing. I don't know, you know, I'm willing to step back, but I would still always want to be involved in some sense. I don't think I could ever be to the point where it's like, you don't ever talk to me sort of thing. I think it's more fun when it's collaborative. If that means that there's two of us working on it together, and the way I worked in management, we had a hierarchy within that team,
Mhm.
but we were all very, very involved and knew what was going on. And it was just really helpful to be able to have everyone in the loop. So if it was something that someone could step in and handle, they could handle it. And I think that's kind of the structure that I'd like to have. But I would, of course, still want to be involved in like the overall design process and suggesting things. And no matter how little or small the task is, like I still want to be in the loop and in the process
Right.
in some way, even if it's someone helping and we're splitting up the responsibility. um, from there, I mean, it would be nice to have more planners than that and to be able to be doing more weddings where I might be just going for a few hours to each wedding, and
Right.
we see how that kind of goes. But I think it also, you know, one, I think the next year will be telling of the direction of how my business is going. And I think it's finding the right person for that as well when the time is right. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, in closing, I always like to ask a bunch of quick fire questions so people get to know you on a deeper level. And they're PG-13 or PG, actually completely PG. So don't worry about that. So don't be scared. So I'm gonna fire off some questions here, and you give our listeners just some information on you. So
Cool.
let's start with music. What's like your favorite band, or like what are you digging on right now? What's like really feeding you?
So my favorite band of all time is Fleetwood Mac. And I love Stevie Nicks, but I always will be a Lindsey Buckingham fan first, which you
All
can
right.
probably appreciate being a guitarist.
I
So
can appreciate the Lindsey Buckingham. Although I gotta say, and you're gonna find this blasphemous, but I am a bigger Mike Campbell fan who played guitar with Tom Petty. Since
mm,
they picked him out for the second time, I'm
hmm
a much bigger fan of Mike Campbell because Mike Campbell, the whole story was is that Stevie wanted to leave Fleetwood and join Tom Petty.
Oh, I didn't know that actually.
So the backstory is after they did Stop Dragging My Heart Around and all that kind of stuff, they
Hmm.
she was obsessed with trying to get into Tom Petty's band, and he was like, "This isn't a chick operation, you know."
Yeah.
He's like, "We're kind of good with just all guys," you know. That was actually
Yeah.
his words. And so you know, she always wanted to sing in Tom Petty's band, and
Hmm.
you know, but Tom Petty was just like, I'm not feeling it. But
Yeah.
but since Tom passed, R.I.P. They and then the second split with Lindsay happened. They called Mike Campbell, the guitar player that played with Petty for years, to be in the band and
Yeah.
to do a tour with them. You know, I don't know if he's full time with them now or whatever.
Yeah.
But man, Mike Campbell is like one of the greatest pop rock guitar players, period, like ever. And Lindsay had a very specific sound or whatever. But I'm
Yeah.
really enjoying this era of like videos, like when you go and you search for him playing guitar with that band, it's just something different and it's really cool.
Um,
So,
I'm gonna have to check it out because I haven't yet. And like I was like, really? Well, now I'm not. I mean, I've seen Fleetwood Mac quite a few times,
right.
and if Lindsey Buckingham's not in it, good to know. I'll check it out on YouTube
Yeah,
before
just go
concerts
look
start
at clips. He
again.
is smoking. I mean, he's played so great. He's one of the best parts guitar players ever. As far as coming up with ingenious little guitar hooks that you always remember, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, for goodness sakes, I mean, Mary Jane's Last Dance, like he just played the chords and it's a hook. Like, you know, he's just a monster in the world of being creative with music. But what's the last book you read? Do you read books? Are you a book reader?
I do. I have gotten really slow about reading.
Well, when you're
And
busy, this is what happens, you know?
yeah, it's really funny because when COVID started, I was pretty good about reading, and I've just not been very good about it lately. I will say one one of the last books that I have spent most of this year reading is Gone Girl
Tell
from
me
the
about
movie.
that. What is that
Yeah,
about?
and so it's actually the book that the movie Gone Girl is based on. Or
Uh,
no, Girl on the Train. Never mind. It's not Gone Girl. It's Girl on the Train. Um, and I actually am not really so much of a fiction book person. Um, yeah, I'm not really much of a fiction book person. I like biographies actually. So yeah.
Right on. Well, that's cool. I like biographies too. I've read many music biographies, probably more than I can count. So I hear you there. Fascinating how people get to where they get to from where they came from.
Yeah.
The are you may have tipped this earlier with your sleepyhead reference, but do you prefer tea or coffee?
Tea.
Really?
Yeah, I can. I've never had a full cup of coffee in my life,
That is
and it
unbelievable.
makes me sick.
This right now. All right, see you later.
I like the smell of it, but I'm all for. I like matcha tea. I love Thai iced tea.
Never not
Yeah.
finished an entire cup of coffee. That is just
I will say I've had like some, mocha frappuccinos in my life and I do really enjoy them, but I'm just really sensitive to caffeine, so I have to be careful.
that makes a lot of sense. If you're sensitive to caffeine, if you were not sensitive to caffeine and you were just like coffee is nothing to me, I think most people would wonder whether you're human or not. Since we know now that it's a sensitivity issue, then you get a pass. But you're the first one that have said tea on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm all about tea.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Favorite food? What's your favorite food?
Mexican food.
Mexican food.
Yeah, Mexican food. And actually that's like one plus of moving to Tennessee. Tennessee has really good Mexican food in comparison to New York. So,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Interesting. So do you like the Americanized Mexican food more so than the authentic traditional like Mexican cuisine?
I I like both.
I'm a guilty
I
as charged.
think,
I like them both too. I can't.
Yeah. I'm definitely the person who likes like the big wet topping burritos that you need a fork and knife to use. And then I also like crispy tacos, which are not traditional Mexican, but there's a really good place downtown Chattanooga that has, I think they have really good like street tacos.
I know this place. I think I've been there. Is it like in that little courtyard area? Like the red brick courtyard area, or no?
No,
Okay, all
no,
right.
it's in the south side.
Okay, there was a tacos place that I went to downtown that was, uh, I can't remember the name of it now, and it was like really good. Um,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, that was,
It's Taqueria Jalisco. They also do weddings too. So
okay. There you go. There you go. Want to make this
yeah,
wedding planner happy? You can just hire that company to cater for you.
yeah.
Literally, she's in. Maybe at a bargain. Who knows? Are you a sports person at all? Do you get down with sports at all? I mean, you are in Tennessee. I mean, are you watching Tennessee football or something like that?
Yeah, I will never, I'm sorry, Tennessee, but I will never be a UT fan because I went to USC. So I know we're not the best
Oh
football team
wow.
anymore. But yeah, I can't leave the Trojans. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you ever get a chance to go to the actual it's the Rose Bowl? They play at the Rose Bowl, right?
Yeah, I never actually went to the Rose Bowl games, but when I went to USC, I had a student pass, so you'd go over to the Coliseum, and it was just
Sure.
walking distance. So yeah,
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 that's a pretty legendary venue
yeah,
for the
for
sport.
concerts.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and concerts. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
and concerts too.
Awesome concerts have happened there.
Mhm.
Are you a beach person or a mountain person? I mean, you kind of live in the mountains now, so maybe.
So as I've gotten older, I have opened up to the beach more. I hated it as a kid, even which is weird being from California.
Yeah,
I
let's
can appreciate
talk
it.
about
Um, I think I prefer hiking, but I don't really do it that often.
that.
Yeah.
Hiking is always one of those things for me that's like when I do it, I'm like, oh yeah, I forget that I like this.
hmm
And then I tell myself I'm going to do this more often. This is so great for my headspace and getting a solid day's worth of walking in and
hmm
being just mobile and exercise sort of driven. And then I
Yeah.
forget like immediately the next day. Well, 2 or 3 days later after the soreness wears off, and then
Yeah.
then you're like, and I just totally forget. And then it
Yeah.
goes for another 6 months, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I like hiking. I should go do that again.
hmm Yeah.
Um,
But I'm not really a sports person. I was did cheerleading in middle school. I've never been on a sports team, but after college, I got really into boxing. I don't
yeah,
currently do it. It's on the list of things to get to eventually again, but yeah, I like boxing.
yeah. That Wilder fight with uh, why am I blanking on the Englishman's guy's name? If you ask me this 5 minutes from now, I'll tell you the guy's name.
Oh, I don't even know. I've watched a few of the recent fights, but I couldn't tell you the names.
I'm being such a horrible person who likes boxing right now. Anyway, when Wilder got uh, it was that like shook the world. I thought for sure that he would take him out, but he didn't have the technique to handle it. But yeah, man, boxing's so great. It's kind of like a lost. I wouldn't say it's a lost art anymore, but like with the rise of MMA, which I'm not really an MMA guy. Like, I mean, I
Mhm.
appreciate people that are able to like potentially kill people in 5 seconds. I think there's some degree of like cool for me, but like
Yeah,
not to the point where I want to watch it happen on screen. Like boxing seems like a much slower paced
sport overall.
process of
Yeah,
getting beat up. and
yeah, that's
I can handle that. I'm just I'm not necessarily into somebody you know potentially gorging somebody's eyes out and then that being the end of the fight. It's kind of a little weird for me, but
mhm,
you
yeah.
know. Anyway, well, hey, listen. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We loved having you here, and I hope that you'll come back soon. Before I let you go, one last question, and you kind of said a nice piece of advice earlier, but has there ever been one piece of advice since you started in this business, at any point that has sort of really been sort of like your mantra or your calling card? Is there anything like that that comes to mind?
That someone has given me.
Yeah, or somebody, a piece of advice you've gotten, or like maybe something you've read somewhere that like really inspired you and like continues to stay in your brain as you go through good times and bad. Is there anything like that that comes to mind that's maybe been that sort of driving force for you?
Man, that's a hard question.
I know.
I kind of mentioned some of them, or things that like, other planners have kind of just said, but um man, advice from one particular, how do you choose like one thing that someone said?
I know. I'm a hard.
I don't Man, I'm kind of ending it on a weird note, aren't I? Yeah. I mean, I
Well,
think it's,
what's it? Well,
you know,
if not,
this is not something, this isn't necessarily something that has been said directly to me, but something that, there's a lot of larger wedding and event planners that just exist in the US in general. And I do like to follow them along. And I think a lot of them, this is from a business standpoint that they really strongly suggest trying to find your ideal client. And I think that's something that it's hard to stay on focus. Um, it's hard to stay on focus in terms of finding your ideal client versus finding a client.
yeah.
And I think that is important advice for any business owner. But even for couples who, are looking, I think that's where it's like, find your ideal team, the team that makes sense for you. Yes, cost comes into that as well. But if someone you think is that ideal person, you want to work with them, talk to them about it, versus just writing it off if that's who's right for you. So I think really focusing on like creating the ideal team, because when you do that, that's only going to be more successful for your business, I think, as time goes on as well. So yeah.
And that is a great way to wrap everything. Thank you so much for being here. We can't thank you enough, and we hope that we can get you on this again soon. And when I come to Chattanooga, I'm going to holler.
Yes, for sure.
All right, we'll see you next
Sleepyhead.
Yeah, right. Sleepyhead.
And maybe some tacos.
Oh, please, all day.
Cool.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.